Hey guys, KangaskKid18 here, and I'm back with the video that I've been itching to do all week. Here's a further 10 Generation 1 shiny Pokemon that at one time or another changed their shiny coloration. Let's start off with the first Pokemon on our list, Slowpoke. Slowpoke is one of those Pokemon that's had pretty much the same shiny since Generation 3. Since then, it's turned this pale lavender color, and much to the dismay of shiny hunters everywhere, it can look pretty similar to a regular Slowpoke in the right light. But it wasn't always this way. Back in Generation 2, shiny Slowpoke turned a deep purple color, which I gotta say looks pretty good, and it's a color I wish they'd kept. Plus, it'd keep shiny Slowpoke more in line with shiny Slowbro, which also turns a kind of purple color, but I suppose it's just not to be. Which brings us to the second Pokemon on our countdown today, Doduo. Shiny Doduo has had more or less the same shiny since Gen 3. The whole thing turns this light yellow-green color, which I think looks okay. But back in Gen 2, shiny Doduo was totally different, turning a bright gold. And honestly, I think this looks way better than the shiny we have today. Moving on, we've got our third spot on the list, Hitmonlee. From generations 3 through 5, Hitmonlee turned a kind of nasty greenish color, which I'm gonna be honest about, I was never a fan of. But then Gen 6 came along, and with it, some shinies got great new colors. Hitmonlee, for example, turned a pale mint green color, making it look way better than it has in past generations. Next up, we've got the fourth spot on our list, which is shared by both Koffing and Weezing. These two have had pretty much the same changes to their shiny, with a small exception, so I've decided to lump them together. Now, from Gens 4 through 7, both Koffing and Weezing got pretty much the same shiny, a kind of teal green with purple smoke and yellowish markings. And in Gen 3, Koffing stayed more or less the same, but Weezing had one big difference. Back then, Weezing's markings turned the same purple color as its smoke, which is kind of weird considering Koffing kept its yellow markings. And then in Gen 2, they were even different still, with both shinies turning a deep blue color with blue smoke. I do love these shinies, but I think the teal and purple shinies they've got today look just a little bit better. Up next, we've got the number 5 spot on this list, and one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, Lapras. It's the reason I always used to get to the Silphco building as soon as I could in Pokemon Red and Blue. But it's had some shiny changes over the years. Since Gen 4, it's turned purple, but with kind of a buffy color on the underside. And then in Gen 3, the purple was a lot mellower, and the underside was so dull, it was almost gray. But all the way back in Gen 2, it looked totally different. Vibrant purple again, with bright pink undersides and for some reason, a pink shell. I don't know why, but I think this shiny looks fantastic, and I kinda wish it still looked like this today. Moving on, we've got the number 6 spot on our list, Flareon. Now, Flareon may be my third favorite out of the original evolutions, but it's gone through several shiny changes. Let's start at the beginning. In Gold and Silver, Flareon turned from reddish orange to straight orange, with very pale orange on the fur and tail. In Gen 3, it turned a much duller orange than before, but this time the fur and tail turned a vibrant yellow color. But Gen 4 is where we got the Flareon we know today. The orange is so dull that it's basically brown at this point, and the tail and fur have turned a light brown as well. It's kind of a shame really, because a lot of the evolutions get bright, vibrant colors for their shinies, but Flareon is always the one left out as a dull, drab brown. Which brings us to the number 7 spot on our list, Porygon. Porygon is another one of those Pokemon that's had pretty much the same shiny since Gen 3. The whole thing turns a beautiful blue color with pinkish gray highlights, because I don't really know how to describe that color except pinkish gray, so if you have any better ideas, please let me know in the comments. But shiny Porygon looked radically different in Generation 2. Back then it had a deep violet color with dark blue highlights, and I gotta say, it looks pretty cool, but still, I'm such a sucker for the color blue that I'd rather stick with the shiny that we've got today. Next up, we've got the 8th spot on our list, Snorlax. And in keeping with a lot of the Pokemon on this list today, shiny Snorlax hasn't changed much since Generation 3. It's always turned a bright blue with paler yellow on the undersides. But back in Gen 2, shiny Snorlax had a subtle but important change. The whole thing turned dark blue, but I think most importantly, the brown pads on its feet turned blue as well. I'm not sure why they decided to forego this design change in future generations, and it's too bad because I think it adds a cool new level to shiny Snorlax. Moving on, we've got our number 9 spot, and the only legendary on today's list, it's Moltres. Shiny Moltres is another Pokemon that's hard to explain unless I start at the beginning. In Gen 2, shiny Moltres turned a light pink color, with deep crimson flames, which I think looks amazing. In Gen 3, it turned kind of a salmon pink overall, with orange flames and more of an orange color to the beak and feet. In Gens 4 and 5, however, the pink turned a mellower color, and the flames, beak, and feet both took on a touch of red. But then in Gen 6, we got a major change. The whole body turned a deep pink color, and the flames once again became light orange. Shiny Moltres has had a lot of subtle changes over the years, but knowing Game Freak, it'll get a lot more in the near future. And finally, this brings us to the number 10 spot on our list today, Dratini and Dragonair. Dratini and Dragonair have well-known shinies. Both of them turn a nice pink color, and Dragonair gets bright golden orbs. But they looked radically different in Gen 2. Back then, they turned a light blue-gray, and Dragonair's orbs turned the same color. Ironically, this isn't that far off from their regular color scheme today, but in my opinion, this shiny is honestly pretty lame. I usually don't like blue Pokemon that have pink shinies, but I think in this case, I'll make an exception. Alright guys, we've gone through the entire Gen 1 Pokédex, and while I'm sure I've missed a couple here and there, I hope I've pointed out some of the more obvious shiny changes through history. So where do we go from here? Well, Gen 2 of course. I've got 10 more shiny Pokemon picked out from that generation, so keep an eye out for that soon, but until then guys, as always, we are gonna see you on the next shiny.